Welcome to this very special episode of Running for the Bus, presented by BKDMC and hosted by me, Ben Kelleher. You're joining us live from the Gower Peninsula in Wales at Love Trails 2026. Now today, I'm joined by someone who, at 26, holds the title as the European Under-23 marathon record holder, having won Manchester Marathon, and previously held the British Under-20s half marathon record, with multiple wins to her name, as well as representing Team GB at the World Athletics Championships. But really, she is just getting started. Please welcome Becky Briggs. Thank you.
Hello.
Becky, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm enjoying my time in the Welsh countryside.
Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it? I know we're both based out in London, so it's a bit different for us here. And getting a few more trails in. Are you enjoying Love Trails so far?
Yeah, I'm absolutely loving it. Did a gorgeous run this morning. So nice to be, out in the countryside and for once out of Battersea Park as well.
Yeah, it's a bit of a treat. You don't see many horses around Battersea Park. I saw you were out with those yesterday.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's very, very pretty around here. And yeah, incredible. So I'm sure there's lots more. We can see a run going off right now. So much going on. So what else have you got planned whilst you're here? You've got a talk later today, is that right?
Yeah, so I've got a talk back here later, I think 4:45. So would love for anyone to come along to that. So yeah.
Nice, brilliant. Well, you can definitely look forward to that. But before we go any further, I really wanted to dig into where your journey actually began. So has running always been in your DNA since you were sort of a young child?
So, yes, I would say it has been. Growing up, both my mum and dad did run, just the sort of local 10Ks, but, this would have been sort of 2006, 2007, so when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I saw them, doing the local 10Ks, going to the local athletics club. So it's one of those things where I'm like, do you know what? Yeah, I think it is in my DNA. And my dad, even though, he's, 58 now?
Yeah.
He will run maybe once or twice a week. He did the local 10K last month, and he ran 45 minutes. And I'm like, do you know what? I do think running's in my DNA because that is really impressive.
Yeah, there's not many people out just doing that, let alone, like you say, maybe a little bit older. And that's incredible, really, to be fair. So, what did training look like initially for you as you sort of began to develop as a runner?
Yeah, for sure. So in the very, very early days, I was part of Kingston upon Hull Athletics Club, which was based at Costello Track, and we did sort of, the classic track sessions, and it was very much just sort of, group sessions, and then I'd go out for some, runs at home with my mum or dad as well. So it was very much always a long distance runner. I was never destined to be sort of a sprinter or anything.
Really? Wow. I think you're a very fast long distance runner, to be fair, as well. So what sort of point did you realize that it was maybe more than just something that you enjoyed and, it became this full-time career for you now?
For sure. So I would say that the first ever half marathon I did was when I was 18 years old, and it was Brass Monkey Half Marathon in York, which is quite a well-known half marathon up north, and it's a really, really flat and fast course. And I think that kind of the legal age to do a half marathon is 18. So, I was kind of the youngest possible age that you could do it.
Yeah.
I had no idea what time I was sort of aiming for. In my head, I was like, I'd love to run a sub 80. And I just sort of set off and ran really, really hard. And it was before the days of carbon shoes. I wasn't really looking at my watch. And I came in 74:57. And that was the moment that I just thought, do you know what? I actually think that maybe this is beyond, a hobby now. And it's something that I can really take further because, at 18 to run sort of sub 75 for my first half marathon, I was like, okay, this is making sense that, some of the marathon qualifying times actually feel like they could be within reach in the next few years.
Yeah, most definitely, absolutely. And sort of in that time, you've obviously gone on to then compete across track and cross country and road races, as well as at home and internationally. So which of these could you maybe say is your preference, I guess, at the moment? Because I guess it can change, right?
For sure. So I would say that the marathon at the moment definitely has a really special place in my heart. I just think that there's so much, I don't know, it's really, really special, and it's such kind of a recognized distance, and, so many people run marathons for so many different reasons, which I think is so, so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that, you really do get the chance to sort of, tick off some travel at the same time and those big bucket list races. So I would say the marathon.
Yeah, I kind of see that as well. Like you say, when people on a marathon you have such a range of people doing it for different reasons, and like I think that makes it such a special experience because you've got people like yourself going for a certain time and doing it for that, but then you've also got people doing their first ever like races and it's like, and everyone's crossing that line and going there for those different experiences. So yeah, I can see exactly why you would say that. And what are some of the lessons maybe you found like you've taken away from some of these experiences that you've had so far? Like what do you think you've taken from those?
Oh, I would say the biggest sort of like lesson, especially within the marathon, is to really sort of like look up and enjoy it, because it is really, really difficult, and you're putting your body, through so much. But when you are doing some of these races, whether it is like the major marathons, for instance, running through perhaps like New York or Chicago, and you think, oh my goodness, like running has taken me to this like beautiful, beautiful place, and like I'm actually here like doing it, and to sort of forget about the watch for a second, to forget about the fact that you might be feeling tired or you've still got loads of kilometers left to run, and just be like, wow, like I'm here.
Yeah, just enjoying that experience. Some advice I had once was, when you're running, don't forget to smile.
Yes.
Don't forget to like enjoy it, right? And there's certain times where you go out for like training sessions and you're out doing like multiple runs in a week, and sometimes it can get a little bit tiresome and hard, and especially when it's raining in Battersea Park, as we were talking about before, and like there's times where it's very, very difficult, and that's the point where you kind of have to smile. And like you say, especially in like a major marathon, if you're maybe out or if you're here like running around the Gower Peninsula, you just have to take it all in, and that in itself makes you smile. Like you get to do it and you get to enjoy it, don't you? So
yeah, 100%.
Definitely. So obviously then in 2020, you won the Bath Half Marathon, which you've done again subsequently in 2024. At the time as well, you became the British under-20s half marathon record holder. What was that moment like for you? What was that experience like?
Yes, that was sort of a really interesting experience, because it was during my first year of university, and I'd sort of gone to university, left my home environment, and was training in like a very, very different sort of like coaching setup and all things like that. And it had been like a really hard 6 months. Yeah. And then by the time it got to Bath Half Marathon, I'd really sort of like got myself back to being like, okay, like I know I can do this, I'm confident. And then it was all the COVID scare. And it was like very, very, very much at that time, it was like so much uncertainty. No one knew what was going to be happening. And, Bath Half Marathon was one of the final races before like everything shut down for lockdown and all that jazz. So I remember standing on the start line and thinking, oh my goodness, I have no idea what the next sort of like 6-12 months of running is going to look like. So I just need to go and give this my absolute all. Yeah. So I did type of thing. It was pouring down with rain.
Really let the brakes off.
It was one of those things where it was like, it was such bad weather, and I was just like, just run. And it was a really, really exciting moment, and definitely something that I took into lockdown with me to be like, right, okay, you can do this, go and train hard, like believe in yourself. And I absolutely did do that. And then 6 months later, I took nearly 2 minutes off my half marathon time and ran. It still stands as my half marathon PB, I think. I ran a 1:12, and that then took me to the World Half Marathon Championships about a month later. So if it hadn't have been for that day in Bath, then I don't know whether I would have had like that belief in myself to take through COVID to kind of, then get to the World Half Marathon Championships.
That's really interesting. What do you think, like as you said, like that day when you did it in Bath, like knowing that you maybe wouldn't have a chance to do it for a longer time, why was it that it inspired you so much? Was it just because,
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and I think it's definitely something for us all to remember, that, when we are kind of like stood on those like race start lines, is that you never know like what's around the corner, like for good, for bad, for just sort of like, changes in your life. Yeah. And that you actually never know when that next start line's going to be. So it's just sort of making the absolute most of being like right there on that day, whether that's going for a PB or whether it's, just having an amazing time. It's being like, actually, this could be my last race, or it could be like my last race that looks like this for a really long time. So just really sort of making the most of it. And that's definitely then something that I like took forwards with me to be like, no, just like right here, right now, stay in the present. Yeah.
Do you have to keep like reminding yourself of that during the race, or is it like something you
set for sure. It was like, honestly, one of those days where it's absolutely pouring with rain, and you're just thinking, no, just kind of like get to the finish type of thing. So
yeah, that's so interesting as well, and the fact that it then spurred you through, because who knows how that journey would have taken it if you hadn't done it like that. So like having that motivation and then taking that to 2 minutes off is amazing. So how do you train for a race like that, especially when you don't know if it's gonna happen, but like more so just how did you train to get yourself ready from where you were before?
Yeah, for sure. So at that time I was at St Mary's University, and it was very much just sort of like the classic, intervals, a lot of steady running, tempo running, and yeah, I think, ultimately, because I was very kind of like young to be running those times, a massive part of it was that like I could tolerate quite high mileage.
Yeah.
I've always been a high mileage runner, and I think that really just sort of like gave me the kind of like, burst to be able to kind of, run those times at that age.
Yeah, just having that experience sort of in the legs and getting you there. So what does your week look like when you're preparing for a race day, like in terms of like nutrition, sleep, when you arrive at the location? Do you get there like a few days before, if it's like international, for example? Like how do you prepare going forward for that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's one of those things where it's like, we can know exactly what like the perfect thing is to do on race week, but also like life happens, and sometimes you can't kind of, if for instance, say it's, Chicago Marathon or you're doing New York, you can't always arrive there like a full week before and, be completely time adjusted type of thing. So you just have to make the most of like what's realistic.
Yeah.
So kind of like, doing those things where, you're packing all the nutrition that you can to make sure everything's as familiar as possible, just staying calm and, not overthinking the process.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes we can get so like het up in our own heads, and then you think actually some of the best training runs that you've done could have been at the back of like a really busy week. You might have not had ideal preparation and you've just gone out and smashed it anyway type of thing. So I think that sometimes, we can like really, really, really overthink things.
Over-analytical.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that sometimes actually just, sort of ignoring some of the stats on your watch, for instance, like I never wear my watch personally to like go to sleep. I'm like, especially, the week before a race, is knowing that your heart rate's a bit elevated actually going to be helpful? Probably not.
Yeah.
So kind of like taking into account those things and just thinking like, right, just keep myself calm, enjoy being here.
Yeah, that's so valuable as well, because that's something I've discussed with coaches before, is about like a night before the race and being like nervous about a race and, not getting the best sleep and not getting this. And some really good advice was actually what you've already got in your body will get you through the race.
Yes.
So even if you have like the worst night's sleep, you'll be fine for the race. You'll be knackered later on if you've had a bad night's sleep before, but you'll be fine for the race, and then you end up having a great night's sleep anyway, because you're like, actually, I don't need to worry about this. Right?
100%. And I think it's one of those things where it really, really does go to show that, like, not everything has to be perfect. The night before I ran my first London Marathon, I did not fall asleep at all. You know how you have those rare nights where sometimes, once in a blue moon, you actually just don't fall asleep, and it was the first kind of like London Marathon after COVID, so it was a very strange environment. It was pouring with rain all day again, and the hotel was in Windsor, and I'd just been inside all day, and I think it was just so much sort of like nervous energy, and I was like, I've been training so hard and been so like back to back to back, and now I've had the taper. All I've done is, my shakeout run, and I've got so much energy, and I was just wide awake, but I was fine the next day, and I think it goes to show that like, it doesn't need to be perfect, but you just need to back yourself and be like, I'm going to be okay.
Trust what you've done already. Trust that process and that journey. And you see someone with like the best marathon like records in like New York. There's a great story about one of the winners there, and she'd been out for like a steak the night before, and like I think she had some wine, and she went and won it the next day. Like sometimes, not saying that's the best advice, but quite clearly when you sort of take a little bit of a step back and trust what you've done, and you realize that you can. So obviously, as you say, you can trust that. But are there any like fundamentals that you're like, okay, this is what I'll prepare like during the week, so that I know I'm not going to worry about it come sort of Saturday night or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think making sure that it goes without saying that things like having all your gels, having all your kits sorted, making sure that you know the pre-race logistics. The last thing that you want to be doing is scrambling around and not knowing, how you get to the start line, especially for some of these bigger races like the major marathons. It can be complicated, like New York Marathon, people are getting, buses, ferries, and you don't want to be kind of thinking about that last minute. So I think those sort of like actual logistics, make sure you know them in advance. You don't want to be kind of panicking that, you can't get to the start line. I feel like I'm probably not the only person that's had, all those like dreams on race week where you just can't for some reason get to the start line. Like, no matter what you're doing, you're just not getting closer. And I think that like planning ahead sort of like reduces that anxiety for sure.
Yeah, just having all those things in prep. And obviously then on like race day when it comes, like what does that look like for you, just from waking up, to getting to that start line? Like, how do you get there?
Yeah, for sure. So waking up, and then my pre-race breakfast is always bagels and jam. Just keep it simple. Coffee, and then I'll always do,
Any
like
peanut butter, or you
no, not pre-race.
No,
Yeah, just purely carbs. And then I'll always, put a good playlist on, do my makeup. I'm definitely like a feel good, run good person. So
nice.
Put on my race
What's
outfit.
top of the playlist for you?
Ooh. It could be a bit of like Shania Twain, on race morning for sure.
Very good.
Yeah, get myself ready, and then just head to the start line. I think it's one of those things where I'm definitely like a music in, sort of like block out the noise on race morning, and I think that's like a really good time to sort of like be with yourself and just remember like I am actually just doing this like for me, and
Yeah, that's so important, isn't it, on like a race day? Because I feel like often if you have people out supporting you and cheering you for these different things, you kind of have to go a little bit insular come sort of Saturday night going into Sunday. And just really, and like sometimes they'll be like, are you okay? Like, is everything fine?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm great. I'm just getting in that zone, right? I'm just getting myself ready for it. So you absolutely have done that. And since then, obviously, you've gone on to do like so many amazing things in that time. Like, what sort of led you to keep pushing through those times where like maybe you're struggling in like training or anything like that? Like, how do you get to that stage?
I think it's just sort of like the excitement in the unknown. I think that's the really beautiful thing about running, is that you never quite know where it's going to take you, and you never quite know your potential in it. And I think that's the really exciting part, is that like there is sort of like there is no finish line. The finish line is that inevitable point where there will become a day when you can no longer like run anymore at the same sort of like level, or it might look a bit different. So I think that's what always inspires me to keep going, is that like you just don't know what's next, and you don't really know what you're capable of.
Yeah, that's so inspiring. And obviously then you went on to win Manchester Marathon in 2022.
Yes.
Becoming the European under-23s marathon record holder, as you still are. And during that training period, could you see that being a possibility? Is that something you envisioned? And was it maybe an ongoing conversation or with your coach as a goal?
Absolutely not, no.
Really?
So it was one of those things where 2022 was, in that year, there was the World Championships, the European Championships, and the Commonwealth Games. And then there was also qualifying for the European 50K Championships. And Manchester Marathon was the qualifying race for the Commonwealths, Europeans, and the 50K. So it was kind of like, right, okay, this is the race that you're doing. Because of COVID, London was all sort of like skew-whiff. So it was like, right, Manchester's the one that you're doing. Knew all the different qualifying times. And the qualifying time for the Commonwealth Games, I believe, was 2:34.
Right.
And that was the one that was sort of like, where I was like, okay, maybe I can do this, because I'd ran 2:34:30-ish 6 months before at London Marathon. So I was like, okay, like I think that's like within reach. But then once again, like I set off on the day, and I had trained really, really, really hard in that build up to it. My goodness, some of those sessions that I did solo around Bushy Park at the time were absolutely brutal. So I was in really, really good fitness, but I did not expect to run 2:29. And there's, the videos of me crossing the finish line. I am really, really shocked. I had my watch showing just 1 kilometer at a time, so I had no idea what the sort of like cumulative time was. In my head, it was like, going to be 2:33 or just under 2:34. So when I saw that it was, the clock was like still on 2:28 as I was like coming down into the finish, I was like, oh my goodness, wow.
Goodness me, that must have been quite a moment, like just that realization, right?
Yeah, it was crazy. Like it's a really hard one to describe, but it was, I think the marathon's so special because you really do spend so much time in your own head. And then you get to the finish and you're like, wow, okay, like it's over. I can like take the blinkers off and I'm like, I'm still here type of thing.
Yeah, so, suddenly like the world is open again.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as you say, it's also that training period, right? Like those moments in Bushy Park or wherever you're sort of training, and often as somebody's training at your level, you have to sort of train on your own, or you might sometimes get out of other athletes. But there's a lot of time and a lot of hours spent in the rain and the wind and the snow and every type of condition and the heat as well.
Yeah.
Like those times where maybe like when you're running that marathon, do you find yourself maybe like digging in and like thinking actually, like think of what you've done to get here?
Yeah, for sure. And especially that training block leading up to Manchester. I was still at university at the time, and it was like my last year. So I was like doing my dissertation, I was working as a nanny, and it was just really, really hard. I was doing all the training solo. You know, I was unsponsored, didn't have any physio support. You know, not like, you know, I was just sort of like going out and like doing my best type of thing. And my classic Friday was that I would wake up and do my marathon session. It'd be, you know, like 20, 22, 24 miles. I'd get back, and then just out of, you know, bad luck, I was doing a physiology sort of like module at the time, and it was all on heat adaptation. So we were in the heat chamber doing sort of like physiology testing, and I'd be sat there and I'd be thinking, I'm absolutely useless in this, you know, in this sort of like practical assessment thing. And it's like 35 degrees in here. And then I'd go straight from that to my nannying job. I'd get back home at like 9 p.m. on a Friday and I'd be like, I've got nothing left to give to the world. But I genuinely think that it was, you know, the combined effect of like the training and everything else that I was doing at the time that gave me sort of like that resilience that like on the day in the marathon, like, you know, I could kind of like get through it.
Yeah. That is it, isn't it? It's those moments where like you build that up and you actually see like all the things that you did to get there. And like now as you train, obviously you don't have to do those other things as much, but you still have to then find that resilience and probably like think back to those times where you were able to do it even amongst all of that going on.
Yeah, 100%. It's a really, really interesting one, and I do think that especially with the marathon, and it's not really talked about, and I don't have any science to back this up, but I think that putting yourself in uncomfortable situations that aren't necessarily even related to running is really useful. Because it's just building up that tolerance to be like sitting in something that's like discomfort that then you can like take forwards.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was like when I first got into like running and marathon running as well. That was a conversation of like I was not a runner in any way. Like I'd run for like 5 minutes and have to stop sort of thing. But like people who knew me were like it's the determination, it's the mindset that will be what drives you through. Like even if it takes you, you know, a day to run it, you know, that's what will happen. And then bit by bit, you still have to keep that mindset. And in a way, it's like for you, do you find as well, like it's almost like it gets kind of harder to keep that mindset when you don't have to like do it in terms of like the other things, like because you have to still make sure you're getting the training and feel like you're doing enough. Like. Yeah,
for sure. It is a really interesting one, and I think that sometimes, you know, when everything is like not perfect, you actually end up running better because you've got that like, right, okay, I've got to fit this in now. You know, I've got to kind of like put myself through this type of thing. So yeah,
that's really, really interesting. And I wanted to also just get into your sort of psyche during the race. So like when you're out, you're running maybe like particularly a marathon being the focus for you going forward at the moment, but I know you've got a 10K coming up next week as well. What are you thinking of? And like do you do any work as well to like mentally prepare for like what might be going on in your mind at that time?
For sure. I think it's a really interesting one, and bizarrely, when I'm like marathon training or, you know, doing those really, really hard sessions, that's the time that I'm thinking the least because because I'm having to concentrate so hard to hold the pace that I'll probably like write a few mantras on the back of my hand, often something like block out the noise. And I can't tell you what I'm thinking about. Thinking about how long I've got left on the rep, maybe.
Really?
But that's about it. Like there are very few thoughts going through my head apart from, you know, just like keep going, like lock in the focus, and, you know, you just have to like keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I think that that's a massive part of why I run and why I enjoy, you know, training hard. And even if there was never a race start line again, I would still do those really hard sessions because it's the time when I'm like, that's the time when my mind is quiet.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's so interesting because also a lot of people say to you probably as well, like you know, how do you fit it in? How do you do this? How do you train? And actually, sometimes these are the best parts of the day. These are the moments where I'm like my most happiest, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So like, it's really interesting to get into the cycle of that. And do you find like when you're training as well, do you ever like listen to music, or are you just out running? Like where do you like?
Yeah, so sometimes I listen to music, but if it's actually like a hard session, then I probably won't.
Okay.
Because I'll never listen to music
like the mindset in the race.
Yeah, because I won't listen to music in a race, and it's one of those strange things where, and this is actually really interesting that. I was doing a track session with my friend a couple of weeks ago, and they were setting up for a sports day, and they had like music coming out of the speakers. And we were doing our session, and she was like, "It's funny, isn't it? Because when we're running the reps, I can't hear the music." And I said, "Yeah, same. And that's why we're doing it."
Yeah.
Because you like, you know, you're trying so hard that I can't hear anything.
Yeah, that's. So
and I find that really, really interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, that is so much. And as saying, like, then taking that into the race, do you find yourself at times, is there any moments where like doubt might creep in, or like, you know, obviously you're in pain, like because you're going, like you're trying your hardest and you're giving everything. Is there moments where you might think, I don't know if I can continue, or I don't know how I will get through, or do you just think of that next rep just like you did before?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of those things where it's like, you know, some races you have and you do feel like really, really strong and really, really resilient, and then every so often you'll get a race where you just don't feel like that.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely like having those mantras and having almost like a, you know, a non-negotiable with yourself that like you just aren't going to quit is like really, really important. You know, like recently I did the World 50K Champs in Delhi, and that was the most, you know, incredible but strange experience in my entire running journey so far. And I just told myself that there was absolutely no way that I had gone out to India to be stood on that start line at the World 50K Champs and I wasn't going to finish. It was a complete non-negotiable. No matter what I did, I was crossing that finish line.
Yeah.
And I think that that's sometimes you have to sort of like have those reasonings with yourself to be kind of like, no, I'm doing this. Like I am doing it.
What do you think it is that's the difference between like those days, as you say, when you feel like you're in the best zone and when you don't? Like why do you think that is? Is it down to like preparation? Is it down to...
I think often for me personally, it's actually due to external things going on in my life, completely outside of running. You know, life happens, and sometimes, you know, as much as you can try and block out the noise, we're not robots, and sometimes you just can't, you know? And I think that that's often for me the biggest factor between whether I have it or whether I don't.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay.
Like, yeah, it's absolutely. I think it's absolutely okay, because it feeds into when you do have it. Like those moments when you feel prepped and you're ready to go. And also, like you say, sometimes like in Delhi, perhaps you had to really get yourself past that. What made it so like such a wild experience for you?
Okay, so it was, you know, it was my first ever ultra marathon. I'd never run further than the marathon distance before, but I'd been picked from my marathon times and kind of, you know, like being able to run back-to-back marathons like within the 2:30s.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, this is an incredible opportunity to go and represent, you know, GB in the World 50K Championships. But yeah, it was in Delhi in India, which, you know, of course is really, really hot, humid, polluted. And, you know, it was a 4 a.m. race start. So as we were talking about before with the lack of sleep, that was actually 10:30 p.m. the day before in the UK. So there was no time to like time adjust. And I simply just did not sleep at all the night before the race because we had to get up at 1:30. You know, like all these crazy things where like all this great race preparation just all completely goes out the window. And you just have to think, nope, I'm going to be all right. And yeah, it was 10 loops of essentially running around a track and then doing an out and back along a dual carriageway. And it was pitch black until 39K. And all you could hear was just wild dogs like running alongside you.
Really?
I unfortunately hadn't had time to have a rabies jab beforehand. And I was like, wow, yeah, I am genuinely terrified. And I think that...
my life.
Yeah, 100%. But I was also like, I am finishing this. I'm here and I'm finishing this.
Yeah.
But that was a really, unique experience, but gave me so much in terms of, you know, perspective and the fact that I was so lucky to actually just, you know, be there and, you know, have that choice to be running the race. But that was really like a, wow, you know, this is you versus you right now.
I should say as well, it's also running out for Team GB. Like, what's that like for you to be able to go and represent, you know, like your country and do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really incredible. And it's one of those things where there's some things that you kind of think, right, when I'm, you know, 80 years old and I can't run anymore, I'm going to look back and be like, wow, I was really, really proud of that. So, to be able to kind of, you know, go on from running in my first GB vest being the World Cross Country Championships and then the half marathon and then the marathon, I was like, if I have the opportunity to run over the ultra distance for GB, then I'm absolutely going to do it. Yeah. And I'm really proud to be like, okay, like I've actually done that, which is crazy.
It is, but it's amazing, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. So it's very exciting as well.
Yeah.
Just enjoying that moment as it's happening. And like thinking to some of those successes that you've had, sort of obviously in the halves and the marathons and the records that you've got, is there moments in that race where you're doing it where you give yourself permission to believe that you're going to reach the goal? If it was, you know, you're aiming for like a 2:34 and obviously you're way, or under 2:34 and you're way under that, was there a moment where you're like, yeah, this is happening and I just need to keep locking in now?
Oh, I don't know. I think that actually I've been really lucky in my running journey to have other people who believe in me more than I believe in myself, and they've been really important to get me to like where I am now, because I don't know whether I have that sort of real internal belief myself. So yeah, I've been really lucky that the coaches that I've worked with at the time have been able to kind of like see beyond me to be like, no, you can do this. You know, even some sort of like stern conversations of me being like, I can't do it, and then being like, you can and you are doing it.
Is that the type of coach as well that you need? Like somebody who's going to be like...
100%.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Obviously then, as you say, when you get to that moment and you realise it and, you know, the blinkers come off, how does that feel after all of that prep?
Yeah, really, really crazy. I think that's sort of like those runner's high moments that where you just think, oh my goodness, like I've actually done it, are really, really special. And I think that it's so crazy, isn't it, how the body works. And, you know, after I ran 2:29 in Manchester, you know, the massive feeling of just like euphoria that like I crossed the finish line and just sort of like burst into tears, but I just sort of like stood there. It was like as I was in shock. I wasn't sort of like hands on my knees, like really, really tired. And I think that's just so interesting. But yeah,
taking it in, trying to absorb it as much as possible. Obviously then looking at those successes, but also like the setbacks that inevitably come your way. What do you think has had the biggest impact so far on your journeys?
Yeah, for sure. I think in 2022, after I ran Manchester Marathon, I then qualified for the European Championships, which was a really special experience. But my body was super, super tired. And ultimately, like, I was still very, very young. I was still at university. I was doing my best to look after myself. But equally, I didn't have, like, the support system to be training and performing like an elite athlete, to be honest. It was just sort of like me and my long-distance coach and me just sort of, like, doing my best. So unfortunately, I got 2 stress fractures in my sacrum. And that meant, you know, the kind of like upwards trajectory of like my running journey was sort of like completely flattened. And I was like, okay, 12 weeks of no running, I need to build from scratch again, which I did. But that gave me so much perspective in terms of I would much rather be running than not running at all type of thing. So yeah.
That's such a great thing to take away from it. Like, and you would have only got that from that experience, right?
Yeah.
Which obviously at the time would probably not have felt that way. So then looking to the future, like what are your goals going forward? I know you've got Berlin obviously coming up in September, right?
Yes. Berlin Marathon in September. It's a really funny one where, you know, I have ran 2:29 for the marathon, which is an incredible time, but I think now I'm chasing more of a feeling rather than a time, and with that, times may come. I'm not saying that I'm not ever going to aim to run under 2:30 again, but within that, like my running goals have sort of shifted to chasing a feeling. So I don't know. I would love to do all of the majors. You know, I want to run really, really well in Berlin. I would love to run over like ultra distances a few more times. You know, perhaps some of the ultras in, you know, South Africa. That's definitely something that I want to do. But I don't know. I don't, you know, there...
Sounds like a lot of travel in there as well.
Yeah, like, for sure. And it's one of those things where it's like, there was a point, you know, especially when I did run the 2:29, that the Olympic dream was something that I really wanted to do. And now, after seeing so much of the sport, I don't know whether it is.
That's okay. It's okay to find it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's one of those things where it's like my biggest learning has been that I want to look back at my time in running with nothing but fondness of everything. And I don't want to look back and think, I've really sacrificed my life for something that I then didn't achieve.
Yeah.
And that's not me saying that you shouldn't go after, you know, massive ambitions, whether it is time goals and things. It's just that you need to remember to live as well along the way.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, there is no doubt about, especially now with how much the times have been sort of, you know, progressed over the years for the marathon, is that, you know, it's gone from being in 2022, like the, you know, or 2021 Olympics, the qualifying time was 2:29:30, and now it's looking at being like 2:22, if not quicker, for the next Olympic cycle. And that is really, really tough.
Yeah, it's huge jumps as well, isn't it, on the way. As you say, when you enjoy it, and if you're enjoying it, sometimes things just progress from there, and who knows. And if you're enjoying it, that's the main thing along the way. And obviously, you kind of touched on it a little bit there, actually. Like, given what you've already achieved, do you feel like a bit of like an internal pressure or external pressure from other people, like to go on to do these things?
Yeah, for sure. It's a really, really interesting one when, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm known as Becky Briggs, the 2:29 marathon runner. And as much as I am so, so proud of that, like, it is not who I am.
Yeah.
And I think it's not like what I want people to remember me for in the world of running. I think that, there's so much more, to it than that. And I think that, there can be that sort of pressure. But I think that, for all of us, whether you're rocking up at a race or whether it's a park run and someone's like, oh, are you going to run this today? It's actually just being like, you are completely allowed to just be like, no, I'm just doing this for me today.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that like we all need to remember.
Sort of taking like ownership of it.
Yeah,
as well. Like,
take away
like
the
how you
external
manage it,
pressure.
like,
Yeah, take away the comparison and just be like, actually, this doesn't matter to anyone else apart from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And obviously as well with that, like you sort of touched on there, like you want people to know you for more than just that. And I guess that leads me to this question of like, what advice would you maybe give to, what advice do you think that Becky in 5 years would give to you right now?
To remember the small moments within running, because really they're actually the big moments. And I think that goes so far beyond, races and, PBs and times, but it's those moments where you really feel alive. And I feel so lucky to have found something, or for running to have found me, to be like, I could not feel more alive than I do in this moment. Like this morning, my playlist on, full blast out loud as I'm like, running over like the hills completely on my own, just having the best time and thinking, that's when I feel most alive.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's like, those are the moments where you're like, I'm here. Like, this is it.
Just being in that. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such a big thing to take away. And as you say, what people will see from you and hopefully be inspired, I guess. Is that what you want people to maybe take away from what they see and what you do? It's like, enjoying it.
Yeah, for sure. Enjoying it, having big goals, but those goals don't need to be kind of completely exclusive to certain times. They absolutely can be related to, pushing yourself for PBs, but also, those goals can be related to, just feeling like you're so alive and living in that moment. Yeah,
I love that. I really, really do. And so that actually brings me to my final question. And we ask this to everyone in just a different form each time. And so what would you say to someone who is looking at what you've achieved, perhaps somebody who's a teenager who wants to take on their next sort of running journey and take it to the next level, or maybe just somebody who's just starting out and says to you, look, Becky, I could never do that. I can't even run for the bus.
Oh, I would say to keep going. I've been running consistently pretty much week in, week out since I was 9 years old. And, that it doesn't kind of like it doesn't get easier to sort of like lace up your trainers and go out, but like that consistency really, really does pay off. And I think that, if you spend that much time dedicated to something, then, eventually you'll sort of improve and you will get there type of thing. So it's to keep going no matter what happens. Like one of my main mantras is it's not over until you decide it's over. And that's completely within your hands, whether it's a big injury, whether, you completely like miss your goal in a race, like it's not over until you decide that it's over.
Yeah, just having that determination, that consistency, that's what's going to push you through. I love that. I love that mantra as well. I'm going to take that forward. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed chatting.
No, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Running for the Bus, live from Love Trails 2026. Thank you to our guest today, Becky Briggs. Make a round of applause again, please. Thank you ever so much. And the team here at Love Trails for having us. Keep your eyes peeled for our next Deliriously Mad Challenge, where 7 heroes, including our competition winner, Jono, will be taking on the 24-hour ultra relay, the Spitfire Scramble, next Saturday, July 11th. You can also head to the BKDMC Insta now to find the tread playlist, the Rookie Runners training plan, and lots more. If you've enjoyed the show, well, what are you waiting for? Hit follow and you'll be notified every time a new episode drops. We'd also love to hear from you, so drop us a message, tell us about your running journey, or just leave a review. See you next time on Running for the Bus, where you can listen and watch on the run, on the bus, or whilst you're running for it. Thanks.